In this video, we're going to examine the drivers of the real exchange rate in the long run. In the previous video, we examined various theories of exchange rate determination in the long run, and we concluded that we need to focus on the real exchange rate trends. We're going to start our analysis of the real exchange rate trends by first noting that the purchasing power parity hypothesis must hold true for tradable products or tradable components of products. Any product that you purchase has two components. Part of it is tradable and part of it is non-tradable. By tradable, I mean, for example, a shirt on a ship on the sea that could be taken to any country. So that's the tradable part. But what you pay for a shirt is not just the price of that shirt on the sea. It includes the shipment costs to the country, within the country. Also, there are distribution costs. There's cost of retail sales. There's the cost of staff that need to show it to you or ship it to you. All those additional costs are local. They happen in the country where you live, where you purchase the product. So the product's price includes partly the payments for the tradable part of the product and another part for the non-tradable part of the product. So we're going to index the prices of all tradable components of the products that we buy by PT and create another index for the non-tradable parts of the products that we buy as PN. The price of the basket of goods that we buy is a combination of these two price indices. And beta here is the share of non-tradables in the country's basket of goods. So P, the price of the basket of goods that we buy, is equal to beta, the share of non-tradables, times the price index for the non-tradables, plus 1 minus beta, which is the share of tradables in our basket of goods, times PT, which is the price index for the tradable parts. A similar equation can also be written for a foreign country with which we are trading. P star is the price index of goods in the foreign country. Beta star is their share of non-tradables, and 1 minus beta becomes their share of tradable goods. PN star is their non-tradable price index. PT star is their tradable price index. Now, the claim that I have is that EPT is equal to PT star, meaning that purchasing power parity holds true for the completely tradable components of the products. The difference in price levels is going to come from non-tradables. But before we proceed, I just want to warn you that some troublesome equations are coming, but keep calm and relax. We have a simple message derived from that equation. So the real exchange rate is the ratio of EP, our basket of goods evaluated in foreign currency, divided by P star, which is the price level in the foreign country. And I substitute for P and P star in the numerator and the denominator. Now, let's factor out PT from the numerator and PT star from the denominator. The reason I'm doing this is that this whole ratio is equal to 1 because of the assumption we made about the purchasing power parity holding for tradable parts of the products. So what we have here is epsilon equal to beta times the ratio of non-tradable prices to tradables plus 1 minus beta, and a similar expression for the foreign country. This has a simple message. But before getting there, let me make sure that you understand and remember all the variables involved. Epsilon is the real exchange rate. PN is the price of non-tradables. PT is the price of tradables in our country. Beta is the share of non-tradables in our economy. And similarly, beta star is the share of non-tradables in the foreign country. PT star is their tradable prices. PN star is their non-tradable prices. Now, what's that important message that this equation has? What it is really saying is that the real exchange rate depends on the ratio of non-tradable prices to tradable prices. That is the heart of the matter. So what we need to do is to understand what drives the ratio of prices of non-tradables to tradables in each country, and that will give us a lot of insights about the real exchange rate trends and also insights about other things, as we will see in a moment. So in order to analyze what factors might be driving the real exchange rate, and in particular what factors might be driving the ratio of non-tradable prices to tradable prices, let me start with an example. Japan's economy experienced very high growth rates between 1945 and 1990. And this was accomplished by very high rates of growth in the tradable sector of the economy. The Japanese government was committed to make the Japanese economy very strong and very competitive in the world. And to do that, they needed to enhance the productivity of firms in the tradable sector of their economy, producing all sorts of products that they ended up exporting to the rest of the world and competing with Europe, United States, and elsewhere. This was done by mobilizing resources, directing the banks to lend to companies that were in export business, Sony, Mitsubishi, Toyota, Honda, etc. Now, that process came to a halt around 1990, and understanding what happened to the real exchange rate may give us some insights into why growth rate came to a halt. Notice that as the tradable sector expanded, GDP of Japan increased, incomes went up, and people started spending more on goods and services. But most of the resources had been spent on the expansion of the tradable sector of the economy, while the demand was being created for the non-tradable sector. So because of this, the prices of non-tradables started to rise relative to the price of tradables in the Japanese economy. In other words, in Japan, because of this policy, PN over PT went up, and as we've seen through that messy equation, this means that the real exchange rate must have gone up. And that's exactly what happened. If you compare prices of houses, for example, that are non-tradable in Japan with the United States, you will see that between 1950s and 1980s, there was a huge difference in price growth, and Japanese houses became a lot more expensive compared to the US houses. This increase in the real exchange rate had serious consequences, because Japanese firms producing in Japan had to pay a lot more for rents, a lot more for labor. Anything that they bought in Japan and was non-tradable had experienced a price increase, and cost of production in Japan had gone up. So a lot of Japanese firms started taking their technology and production process into other countries to produce there, where cost of production was lower. As a result, Japanese economy started stagnating. So what did Japanese government do in response? That also gives us some insights into the trends in the real exchange rate in Japan, and also the consequences of policies that try to deal with the real exchange rate trends. So Japanese government, in response to this slowdown around 1990, decided to spend more to stimulate the economy. What does this mean? It means that the government is going to be buying labor or paying for rent or land a lot of local products. In fact, if the government did not spend on the local products, then growth would go elsewhere, not go to Japan. So the whole purpose was to stimulate the domestic economy by buying local goods, which meant that the price of non-tradables were kept up compared to the price of tradables, which were basically checked by international prices and were determined by the international prices. So the government's policy to try to stimulate the economy resulted in an increase in PN over PT, which again kept the real exchange rate high. And remember that Japanese firms were already trying to move out because of the high real exchange rate, high cost of local goods and services. And as a result, the policy did not help that much because firms were still trying to leave the country. The government tried to deal with this situation by providing financing and credit to firms that tried to stay in Japan, which was helpful to some extent. But the problem was that many of these firms could not pay back this debt because of their high costs. And as a result, by mid-1990s, Japanese banks were in trouble because they had huge non-performing loans. The lesson from this experience, both the support for tradables initially and then non-tradables later on, have implications for many other countries as well. In fact, the idea to grow through export promotion is very popular around the world, and it's been popularized in East Asia. It started with Japan promoting its exports after World War II, and then adopted by other East Asian countries, and then other countries also found it to be a good strategy. However, it has some implications that are very important. As the tradable sector grows, the real exchange rate increases, and therefore something has to be done about it. The idea to deal with this problem by increasing government expenditure and stimulating the economy does not necessarily help, as the experience of Japan has shown. The situation in China, which has also followed the Japanese model to some extent, is interesting and something to think about. Let me contrast the experience of Japan with that of the United States, where more investment has gone into non-tradables, and there's been greater emphasis on the growth of non-tradables. Now, this was not a particular policy choice. It was, in fact, because there was no strategy to promote exports, a lot of investment went to non-tradables. But it had some good consequences. Because the supply of non-tradables increased, the price of non-tradables went down relative to the tradables, which were determined by world prices, and that helped keep the real exchange rate lower in the U.S., which also helped promote exports to some extent. However, at some points since the 1980s, the government of the U.S. has been spending more, and that has resulted in appreciation of the dollar and has hurt U.S. exports, or U.S. trade deficit has increased as a result of that.